You're watching Let the Quran Speak. Now we turn to Islam and extremism. There's a great deal of information about Muslims in the news, and it isn't always positive. How can someone who doesn't know much about Islam separate the genuine practice of Islam from extremism? What are manifestations of extremism? And is there evidence that most Muslims don't subscribe to violence, terrorism, and the oppression of others? With me to discuss, Brother Shabir Ali, President of the Islamic Information Center. Brother Shabir, as I've said, we hear a lot about Islam, and you can wonder, is this really what Muslims are all about? Are they violent? Are they oppressive towards others? Do they treat non-Muslims badly?
I recently read an excellent article about this on the subject, written by a Muslim physician in Chicago. His article is on the Patheos website under the Muslim category.
Dr. Hisham Hasibullah. Yes.
Yes, you're aware of the article. He has given many reasons to show that it's not logical to think of Muslims as terrorists or as extremists. Though obviously in Muslim societies there are extremist elements. Mm-hmm. But the problem remains, and this is where your question is really pointed, how does one distinguish between the two? Mm-hmm. It could be non-Muslims...
Especially if one doesn't know very much about Islam.
Yes. It could be non-Muslims looking at Muslims from the outside, or it could be a young Muslim trying to be a good Muslim and wondering, how do I choose the right path here? I mean, there's so many conflicting views about what Islam is. How do I know which one is the right one? So in essence then, what would we define as extremism? There's an excellent book published by the Islamic Assembly of North America, a book that is about 1.5 inches thick on the subject of extremism. And it has a certain definition of, while it is speaking against extremism and finding all of the evidence that proves that extremism is wrong, what it finally defines as extremism, to me, is in the end extreme.
What does it say?
So then, I mean, whose extremism is the right one, or whose definition of extremism is the right one? So, for example, if it calls, I don't remember the specifics now and why I got this general impression from the book, but it seems to me that it called for certain specific classical Islamic rulings, which to me are part of the problem. Let me explain what I feel to be a part of the problem. Let me put it in the form of a question. Mm-hmm. Muslims are here in Canada, and they're trying to settle in and have all of the things that Canadians have. First of all, the great sense of peace and security and freedom. And second, the livelihood. I don't know if we go with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Probably I'm not getting it in the right order. Probably you need your livelihood first, and then you want the peace and security and so on. But all of the good things that we know about. But then what makes Muslims different here? Are Muslims like other Canadian citizens but with a distinction? Or are Muslims wholly different from other Canadian citizens and they're just trying to fit in a certain niche here? I think this is a very important question, and the way we answer it makes all of the difference. On one view, Muslims are here like fish out of water. The whole society is totally contrary to Islam and Muslims, and Muslims are just trying to find some little niche here to just survive. Some Muslims, for example, would have the idea that they just live here for a while, work, earn some money, and go back to another part of the world, set up a business, and then they will live in the comfortable Islamic environment. So what they think to be an Islamic environment is something very specific, and it's not going to be here. So this is like the fish out of water. This is like the second category, not really here. The first category that I'd like to think about is to think of Muslims as like other citizens, but with the distinction. The distinction being not necessarily a chip on the shoulder, but a special direction in life. We have our vision in the life hereafter. We are going to make all good use of this world, but our vision is the life hereafter. We're going to be like everybody else in that we're going to have to eat and sleep and live and reproduce. But at the same time, we have certain directives by God which we are going to put into place the best we can in the society and in the circumstances in which we live. So this makes a lot of difference because on the second way, the fish out of water type of... so let's take the first one as the assimilating type type of situation. Second one being like the fish out of water. Fish out of water means we're not here, everything here is contrary to us, and we have to change everything. So this is what I believe is at the root of extremism. And this itself gives rise to violent extremism eventually. So while most Muslims would speak out against the violent extremists, many Muslims do have this fish out of water view of themselves. And that too is to me also a problem, because it gives rise to the extremism, the violent extremism. So the violent extremism really builds itself on the view that the society has to be changed so drastically that the only way to change it is really to turn it upside down. And if that has to be done by bombing or whatever you do, by violent means, that's what you do. But the assimilationist view, if I put it this way, says that society is fine as it is. That the land belongs to God. All land theoretically belongs to God. All people belong to God. We are His creatures. And we as citizens with that special distinction that we have our lives on our minds on the life hereafter, our vision extends towards the life hereafter, we have directives by which to live, means that we are going to make adjustments to our lives as it is here. As people, imagine we were like ordinary citizens here, but we just adjust our lives and fine-tune it towards God's direction.
But don't you think the facts on the ground show that the vast majority of Muslims are already doing that?
Yes, but are we considering officially that this vast majority of Muslims are representative of what defines Islam? So if you want to find out what defines Islam today, this writer you referred to, Hisham, the Chicago-based physician, was saying, look, you don't define the actions of Americans by the activities of their, you don't define America by the activities of their criminals, right? But so by analogy, he's saying, don't define Islam by the actions of its extremists. But the analogy breaks down, however, when we realize that America is actively trying to pursue its criminals and to put them behind bars. Whereas if you think that our extremists are the criminals, then they're running loose. And sometimes they're even actually heading communities, and they might be important religious figures and leaders. So,
but in many circles, Muslims are speaking out against these extremists.
Yes, but the question still remains, how do we know to differentiate, and how do we know which are the extremists? So you are right, the vast majority of Muslims, whether Canadians or otherwise, are dead set against violent extremism. But at the same time, their view is not what defines official Islam. Official Islam, if I use the term official, there's no really official. But if I say classical Islam is that which is laid out in the Muslim source books from the classical period. We have books of fiqh, of jurisprudence. We have books of tafsir, Islamic commentary on the Quran. We have books on the life of our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. So this is what defines what Islam is in theory. And then Muslims are either conforming to that or not conforming to that. The vast majority of Muslims are not conforming to that.
Exactly.
Okay?
So what do we have to do then?
What we have to do is we have to rewrite the books. We have to write new books, in other words, that explain Islamic jurisprudence so that Muslims who live in Canada, as an example, or anywhere else for that matter, do not feel like fish out of water. That Muslims living in the present age do not feel that what Islam is really requires a backward mentality or a backward society. Muslims should feel that all of the material progress of modern society, so long as this material progress is built on good and positive human values, then this is all part of Islam. And that Islam is something that welcomes all of this material progress, and it's this progress with a distinction. That the progress is built on humanitarian values. For example, we're not going to build high towers on the backs of slaves. We are not going to profit by selling clothing that is being produced in sweatshops in the third world. So we want progress, but we don't want that sort of progress which is corrupt. We want wholesome and good things. This is what Islam really is. Otherwise, what we find happening is that Muslims are feeling increasingly alienated. The world is changing, and many have a conception of what Islam is in the way in which we dress, the way we carry ourselves, the way we organize our societies, that we feel that all of this is alien to the current and developing world. And this is a part of what is leading to violent extremism, because the violent extremist thinks that everything is going entirely wrong, and the only way to make it possible for Islam to regain its cultural representation as Muslim societies have represented themselves in the past is really to violently change modern society and really to bomb it back to some centuries into the past. And so we need to, as Muslims, understand who we are as a people now, understand the fact that we don't have the same views that our Muslim ancestors had, and for good reason. I mean, sometimes for bad reasons, and that needs to be corrected as well. But sometimes for good reasons. For example, if some of our religious ancestors had patriarchal views that do not represent the current thinking of Muslims, then we need to write books that show what we believe as Muslims today, and what heritage we want to leave for our children and our grandchildren in the future.
All right, let's leave it at that. Thank you for your time, Brother Shafir.
You're welcome.
We'll take a break. When we return, we answer questions we receive from you, our viewers.